Dun, 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 dun,
Are
dun,
we about to
dun,
get Cam
dun,
Whitmore
dun,
with the
dun, dun,
31st
dun,
pick of
dun,
the
dun,
draft?
dun, dun,
What
dun,
the
dun.
heck is going on? If I had my bleed button right here,
Let's go.
I'd be smashing that thing. And we
Oh,
are live in person. I can touch your head. This
told
is
you
so
guys,
nice.
we're gonna get Mr. Murphy in the building, guys. We are live. Listen, man, Woodard Pistons, Woodard Sports. What's going on over here?
Oh, you just left me hanging so bad.
Me?
Generational. Generational left
sorry,
me
brother.
like I just went and Jalen and I
Listen.
just were looking at each other right as that.
Bro, I got the basketball in my hand, man. I don't be paying attention to nothing else. But you know what? I am excited to be here doing content with you. Shout out to Jalen as well. Jalen HTV. Hey, man, he was on point. He was on fire. He had us covered very, very well the last draft, man. The draft lottery show. The photography is amazing. I'm sitting here like, man, yo, I like the way I look through the lens, man. I look better, I think, in those photography and those photos than I do in real life.
Yeah, he's
man,
making
so.
me look a little too good, a little better than I deserve.
Hey, you know what? But look, man, I'm actually excited about this, draft pick, AUSAR Thompson. He was the one that I thought if you're gonna go with potential, that's where you go. Obviously, Jarris Walker, I thought could start day one, or give you what you need on this squad day one from a two-way type of player. But from everything that we were hearing kind of behind the scenes on AUSAR Thompson, his work ethic, his star potential, his athleticism, his playmaking ability, it just kind of seems to mesh really well with the Pistons. Sean, give me your take on AUSAR Thompson one more time. I know we covered it on the draft show tonight, but for the Woodard Pistons channel and for our faithful, man, let's talk about it.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is the pick that can be a home run, right? I mean, you talk about, like what AUSAR Thompson has already, like an elite athletic skill set. We talk about how much of an athletic freak his twin brother, Amen Thompson, is. AUSAR Thompson's not far behind at all. And, if anything, there are some skill sets that AUSAR actually has established right now that are, that are a little bit more developed than Amen, like namely his jump shot. I know we're focused on the Thompson's jump shots. I know he shot 65% from the line last year. That's definitely a concern, something you want to see get up. But at the same time, you look at his baseline and his form, it's not bad. So like the jump shot is something you see a lot of young players develop. It comes down to which guys you genuinely believe in as players. And I think when you look at, a guy like AUSAR Thompson, like the Thompson twins in particular, man, these guys are freaking workhorses. They went they went professional just so that they could just focus on basketball strictly. Yep. These were guys who apparently just had they had iPhone 5s up until last year, which for like 19, 20-year-old kids is a pretty significant thing, like they're pretty on getting the latest phone. But, in all seriousness, like these guys, like the comparisons I've heard for AUSAR, I've heard Andre Iguodala. The comparison I said on the stream that I liked even more was Andrew Wiggins, especially, that 2022 finals Wiggins, who was so effective for them. If he could develop into that type of guy who doesn't necessarily need the ball, but can be someone who can get you buckets when need be, but also someone who can be a ball stopper and someone that can bring you versatility on both sides of the court. I mean, man, there's just so much to like with the SAR's skill set. And they're starting to look like what I would envision the modern NBA version of the Pistons would look like.
Yeah. Man, look, this is a good night. Are you with the noise? Because I wanted to talk about this with Cam Whitmore kind of falling with all of the news that came out about him. Is he somebody that you think the Pistons should or would be good for them to take a flyer on? Or is it just one of those situations where if the news is why he's dropping, that it's something medical, especially with those athletic guys, you generally tend to kind of stay away from them because they have a hard time staying on the court once they reach the NBA. What's your thoughts on Cam Whitmore?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's shocking to see a guy who just a few days ago, we were talking about him being potentially, the pick at 4 going over Amen Thompson. And now, we're seeing him potentially fall out of the lottery altogether. So the fact that, that we're seeing this is unreal. I personally, like as far as whether or not Detroit should trade up, I mean, it ultimately comes down to, how much in love were you really with Cam Whitmore in the first place, right? Like, I don't think it necessarily changes because of where he ends up in the lottery. I mean, if it gets to a point where you can get him for an insane value, then I mean, I suppose, especially since trading up from like 17 or 18, like from 31 isn't that far. But like at the same time, like it's got to be pretty telling that this many teams are passing on him, because I mean, we got Steve here, we got our draft guy. I'm sure you're pretty shocked that he's falling, but isn't it pretty telling that this many teams now have passed on him?
Well, the report that I saw a day or two ago said that the medical was so alarming that teams in the middle of the first round were going to pass on Cam Whitmore. I didn't believe it, but I also heard a lot of reports before then of Detroit not being impressed with him. Didn't really hear Cam working out for anybody or say anything. So it's a little surprising that he's still here. We're at pick 16 and he's still out there. I mean, there has to be something extremely concerning in the medical of like long-term projection that makes people think, you know what, we can't take this guy.
Do you think that there is a pick in which you're like, you know what, this is actually worth it to try and take a flyer?
Right now it's 16. Right now it's 16. Any of these teams that have 2 picks. So this is Utah's pick right now. Utah's already had 1 pick. Any team that has 2 picks, do it. Or the Lakers and the Heat and the Warriors are coming up. Absolutely. Joe's guys, they don't need him, but if he hits, then you're a genius for taking him, right?
It's almost kind of starting to remind me, Steve, a little bit of the Michael Porter Jr. conundrum back when he was drafted in Denver late in the first round, a guy who was also a high lottery player at one point, but because of the injury issues, because of the medical reports, the things that you're hearing going into the draft, that's what makes him fall. And so not to say that Cam Whitmore can't still be a really solid NBA player. I mean, there was a reason why he was scouted to go in the top 5, for so long. Right. But I mean, certainly whatever this medical report is, I mean, it's pretty telling that he's still here.
You also have to add into the fact of his overall quote unquote feel for the game. There are more and more things that came out about that I think it's best summed up by our guy Motor City Hoops, Bryce Simon. He tweeted out a little bit of film where the coaches on the sideline at Villanova are going absolutely ham. Like they're yelling at him. They're like, what are you doing? I think if you're already really down on him in terms of like feel, and then you get a medical thing, those are 2 things that are really hard to recover from in a scouting profile.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at a guy and you compare him to a guy like AUSAR Thompson, when you talk about like differentiating these guys in that mix, like as far as who they're going to pick. I mean, a lot of it comes down to, Troy Weaver very much looks at the person too, right? And so if the reports are that there was some things with Cam Whitmore that kind of left, some things more to be desired, and you kind of look at like the Thompson twins and like how much they are touted as human beings, like it makes sense that they would be enamored with that. I do want to ask you though, Steve, I kind of joked to Kool-Aid right after the stream, and I said, man, I swear to God, the Indiana Pacers are just trying to get Steve. They're literally building the all Steve team. What do you think of Jarace Walker falling to 8 the way that he did? But also, what do you think of his fit in Indiana with the Pacers?
I mean, do you want my honest take? Because I feel like I don't want to get my honest take.
Oh yeah, you're depressed right now, aren't you?
Well, are you a new Indiana Pacers fan? Is that your like team B right now?
All right, yeah, you're depressed right now.
I'm starting the Woodward, Indiana branch there.
Woodward Pacers.
Yeah, whatever special street they have in Indiana, like Ayatollah,
the 500 Pacers. I'll just be on the speedway the whole time. So
Hoosier Amish person street.
No, I have 2 thoughts about it. Obviously, I'm disappointed. I wanted Jarace, but it's not a big deal. Like I've said, the Pistons needed to walk away with one of Jarace, AUSAR, or Taylor Hendricks. So mission accomplished there. Those were the 3 guys they should have targeted. Why I wanted Jarace is I think he's just got that rare defensive superstar potential, like you've heard me say a lot. Somewhere between OG Anunoby and Bam Adebayo, but AUSAR is no slouch. We all have been saying it all night, Andre Iguodala. I don't like the Andrew Wiggins comparison only because Andrew Wiggins cannot pass. Like his court vision is incredibly limited, whereas AUSAR had 6.1 assists per game in their 16-game schedule, at Overtime Elite in the season. And then in their 5-game playoff, he did have 4.8 assists too. It's clear that passing is something that just is, innate in both of the Thompson twins. Yes, the shooting is going to take a while. I think in terms of thinking about like what this means for the Pistons, number one is that Weaver is still playing the long game and there is no rush because it's going to take a while for Asar's 3-point shot to come around. Nobody should be expecting him to come in even at like 30 to 33%. I think it's going to take a while, which is fine. There are a lot of guys that come in the league that it takes them a while to be even average that 3-point shot. But I tracked his 3-point shooting in the last year. I can give you that full breakdown if you would like, but I warn you, it is not pretty.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to get that full breakdown at some point. But Steve, when you look at the, like obviously it is a risk, right? Like because like there are some things with Walker where you could argue he was the safer pick. Like there, we talked about earlier today on the stream that he does have a lot more upside than people might give him credit for. But at the same time, he is a guy that is like out of the box, a really solid NBA player. But what are some of those things that like with Ausar Thompson that like you think makes him that like where it makes sense that he is the guy at 5? Like like what do you think are the things that like jump out? Like obviously we know about the athleticism, right? We know about some of those things, but like what jumps out on the tape with Ausar Thompson that people might not know about?
I said this way back in February. This guy profiles as an easy teammate for Cade because he's always ready to cut, and when he does cut, he's always ready to catch lobs. Like that's just something he did with his brother so much on tape, is being able to be a really good mover off ball and cut to the rim from a couple different places. And he's always looking to catch lobs. So I'm not going to say that's the only reason I think that they were really sold on Ausar, but I bet when they saw that on tape and interviewed him. And that's one of the things we all know how much Cade loves his lob passes. Like, bam, that's the easiest fit, and why I like the shooting stuff. It can take a while because he is always going to be a vertical spacer. And if he becomes more of a horizontal spacer too, then another rare, type of player.
That's something that you guys have heard me talk about for a long time, is that our offense, if there was going to be ever a change to the coaching staff when Dwayne Casey was here, either augmented or a switch, it was to get somebody in here who could take better advantage of their speed and their athleticism. And you're right. Ausar Thompson, he significantly adds to that. But I was a little bit depressed that the Pistons weren't doing things like backdoor lobs to Ivy, running like, opposite off ball pick and rolls, where you got Jalen setting a backdoor screen or Isaiah Stewart setting a backdoor screen for Ivy coming into the middle of the lane and just tossing it up there. When you have facilitators on your squad like Killian Hayes and like Cade Cunningham, that type of stuff just had me a little bit kind of mind boggled. This is where I'm really excited for Monty Williams and Ausar Thompson. Those two coming here with the type of offense that they might run. Yeah, I think that is something to be excited about because it fits Ausar Thompson. And for people that are worried about his 3-point shooting, one of the things that I continue to track during the season, and I got to ask them this question at the exit interviews, was it looked like they're a little bit more unique at stretching the floor. If you cannot hit the 3, can you at least score from the perimeter? We see Bojan Bogdanovic do that pretty easy sometimes. We'll see him take the pump fake and then take 2 or 3 dribbles in, and then pull up on that one leg and hit the short floater. We saw Bojan Bogdanovic do that regularly, and that is stretching the floor. If you can score from your position efficiently. And Ausar Thompson, he to me presents the opportunity with his speed, with his athleticism, to be able to get around some people. If you want to use him as an off ball, some people say, can he stand in the corner and shoot? I don't think that he has to necessarily do that. Like you said, Steve, if you can get them in some dynamic cuts, some plays that keep the offense moving, like those motion offenses, you got a really, really good team that can kind of take advantage of that. And I don't mean good in terms of like playoff team. I mean a team that is good for that style of basketball. I think Ausar Thompson, from just a basketball standpoint, he adds to that overall. His athleticism, his playmaking ability, his ability to kind of drive. I really like Ausar Thompson. We talked about this in January, bro. January 6th.
Yeah.
Y'all posted the video again today. Remember, there were 2 players that I was absolutely, after we went through our profile of who the Pistons could pick, it was Jarris Walker and Ausar Thompson for a long time.
Yeah.
For a very long time. And that's why I'm kind of excited. I kind of temper myself because Jarris just looks NBA ready. Like he can definitely help the Pistons day one. But if the Pistons weren't picking a starter, I continued, as many of us, Jalen, we were talking about it today. Ausar Thompson was that guy. Even Steve, this was the year where last year, it seemed like we all honed in on like one guy, and we were a little bit apprehensive on the guys around. This year, all of us have athletes just been like Walker, Hendricks, Ausar, and that's been cool. because we don't always agree on everything. We don't. Last year's draft, bro, I was like, man, Steve is mean when you don't like Benedict Mathurin. I'm just playing.
He's my guy.
Like
my
this,
paycheck say University of Arizona. I'm not going to turn my back on who pays me, right?
Say that one more time, bro.
My paycheck say University of Arizona on it. I'm not going to turn my back on that. Come on now.
I love you, bro.
Hey, Steve, did you have Jalen Hoods Shafino on your big board above Cam Whitmore?
I did not. No.
This is crazy, man. This
draft it's interesting, man.
Yeah, man, it's crazy. I mean, in all reality, I think, there's always going to be some form of surprise every year. Unfortunately, in every draft, there's always some form of player who falls or goes lower than expectations. But I mean, Steve, looking at the rest of this draft, assuming Detroit stays at 31, right? Like assuming they do make that pick, eyeing your big board, guys that could potentially be around. Is there guys that you're interested in? Are there players that you think could make an impact in a Pistons uniform? Do you think this is a situation where we could potentially see another pick and stash? What are your thoughts?
Number one, if they really like somebody that they do not think is going to be there at 31, then they need to package Bojan and 31 to move up. I don't know if that's the case. However, there are guys that are falling, I think, or at least kind of like been out of the radar more and more as has gone on. Number one is Rayan Rupert out of the New Zealand Breakers, French wing, measured into the combine 6'6" without shoes, 193 pounds, and has a 7'2" wingspan. This guy's a legitimate wing defender. He played for the New Zealand Breakers in the NBL in Australia. They used him as their primary wing defender. He was like their Tony Allen there in their playoffs. He's really, really good defender. The offense is going to come around under 7 points per game, shot under 25% from three. That might be an issue though. Now that's what I'm thinking is like maybe the team goes in a different direction of like, hey, we got our defender and project. Now we want somebody who's a little bit more set, especially as a shooter. If that is the case, and they're looking at just somebody who's a really good shooter, who's going to be available at the end of round one, who is still on the board. Honestly, the first person that comes to mind to me is the guard, Marcus Sasser, who is a legitimate shooter and a really good defender. I can pull up his stats here while I'm talking. But at the University of Houston, he was Houston's leading scorer this past season. Really profiled well last year too, entered the draft conversation, but then decided to go back to try and win a national title at Houston. Sadly, it did not happen with my boy, Jarris Walker. Marcus Sasser, though, 16.8 points per game this last season. Shooting splits were 51.1% from 2-point range, 38.4% from three on 6.9 attempts per game, and then 84.8% from the free throw line, 3.1 assists, and then is a really, really, really good point of attack defender. Like you can think somebody like a Tyus Jones or somebody like a Javon Carter, where you're like, man, this guy's going to put up shots. He is going to defend really well, and you're never going to have to worry about that backup point guard spot because he's very, very good. If the Pistons wanted to, find another shooter there, like at the wing spot, I don't think Chris Murray is going to fall down that far, but that would be a nice addition. They like Keegan last year. Chris Murray is a little bit less of an on-ball creator, but still pretty good shooter there. And then, I mean, the dark horse for if they're just looking at a shooter is somebody like Ben Shepherd, guard out of Belmont, plays a lot like Alec Burks, can create off the dribble, shoot from three. Seth Lundy's another guy. I know they've had Seth Lundy in for a private workout because he's been reported there, shot all his pictures on IG and stuff. Really good 6'6", around 220, shot over 40% from three. He's one guy, if you look at his shot chart, everywhere from 3-point range is red. So those would be ones I would be thinking about at 31.
I know a guy that, especially in Detroit, that people are going to be honed in on later in the draft. And I know a lot of, a lot of Michigan natives, especially, is Amani Bates. And, I don't think it's I don't think it's a secret. I don't think he's in play at 31. I think, he is a little bit hard to tell like where his value could be. I've heard, you've heard people try to say that he could maybe sneak into the end of the first round, but in reality, a lot of mocks have had him either in like the 50s range or possibly even undrafted. What do you foresee happening for Amani Bates tonight? And if you were to pick a tailor-made situation where you think you could go and thrive, what would be your pick?
Miami Heat. I think he's got to go to a place like Miami Heat where they have a real like set, you know, line. They have set veterans are already there. They have a development system in place that has been proven, and they also invest in somebody who's not a high round pick to Miami. I mean, look at how many undrafted dudes they had in the NBA Finals. That's just
Yeah.
a
Mm, yeah.
place where they really will invest in you, even if you're an undrafted free agent, because everything in their scouting department is like the guys that we target, we like, and we're not going to give up on. Just they've had so many different success stories. I think that's, I don't want to say it's the only situation, but it's really not
If
the
like
thing.
if he's
If I
going to
were him
truly
in his
have
camp,
success, it's going to have to be a situation like that because, I mean, as talented as he is, it's not going to like, from, with where he's coming from, and especially with some of the character questions, you need to have a solid foundation,
yeah, and I
to
mean,
be
if
in the
I had
league.
any influence over him, I would be like, again, look, they will invest in you. They, if they pick you, then they're not going to give up on you. And Miami also does a really, really, really good job of being like, okay, we know who you are, and we're really not going to change it. Gabe Vincent, Cody Martin, Duncan Robinson, who I'm very familiar with being the Michigan alumni, they have not changed those guys. They've just been
Yep.
like, hey, we're going to let you do what you do to the max.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. Hey, look, guys, I'm pretty impressed right now with this Asar Thompson pick. Like
Yeah.
I just keep going back to I'm looking at just kind of some of the comments, seeing some people warm up to it. I'm seeing a lot of people who are just like, it should have been somebody else. But overall,
I think a lot
a
of
lot of people
people
are
I think a lot of people loved the Cam Whitmore hype. I think a lot of people saw the highlights, the alley oops, the dunks, like the 3-point shooting. Obviously, there's a lot to like there. And I know that, especially at 5, especially when it's a little bit more of an open array of prospects, you can fall in love with a certain guy. But I'm telling you, if you go and watch tape on Asar Thompson, if you go and watch, like interviews of these guys and listen to them talk and see them play basketball, like I'm telling you, in 2 weeks' time when it's summer league and we get to see Asar Thompson go out and hoop, he's going to be ready to go. And I tell you what, I mean, it's pretty much guaranteed at this point. We're seeing Amen versus Asar in summer league, right? Like that's going to happen. Like that's going to be an event.
that's gonna be hey, it's gonna be
Like I know the
almost
real
pay-per-view
event's going to be
watch.
Victor Wembanyama, but like Amen versus Asar is going to be freaking pop. Get your popcorn, dude.
I
I'm
can't wait to
serious.
see it,
Those
man.
guys are like they're naturally competitive already, but I mean, Steve, they're super competitive against each other.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. With Asar Thompson, what is really starting to like excite me about what the Pistons are doing is that to me it shows that they're serious about winning.
Yep.
Troy came into this and he said, you know what, we like what we have, and we're really looking at the players that not just best fit around them, but we think can help these guys win and get to the next level. I'm glad that they see that potentially in an Asar Thompson, somebody who can come in and contribute, because that was kind of the biggest question is, can he come in right away and be as NBA ready or as impactful to when they're winning as we think a Jarris Walker or a Taylor Hendricks could have been?
And they're
It-
serious about winning, but they're not rushing the timeline either. Like
yeah.
they're giving Monty the patience. They're
Yeah.
they're taking the long game with bringing in a guy like Asar who can over time become an awesome player, right?
Well, I think when some of the things we talked about last year, when we said when they pick Jaden Ivey, he's going to have the luxury of Cade Cunningham here. So a lot of the
Yep.
pressure is not on him. He can just play to his strengths.
Yep.
And when you look at these players and their strengths and you add Asar Thompson to a team that has Cade and Ivy and Duran and then some smart guys like Bojan and even Killian, it allows him to just play to his strengths. And when you start talking about that, then we're talking about the athleticism. Then we're talking about the lob passes. Then we're talking about a guy who can play make pretty well. You're talking about a guy who, when I'm thinking about transition, I saw somebody else, I think RB the Baller talked about it too. We don't play downhill. Our teams just don't play fast. Adding another person like this with that height, his playmaking ability, his speed, his ability to kind of get up and down the court, it excites me. And honestly, Steve, when we were talking about this, to kind of go back to Sean's point of the hype of Cam Whitmore and such, when we started our draft analysis, and we've done this, I think, 2 or 3 years in a row now, man, where we kind of get together around this time, we go over some prospects. I know the first year we didn't really publicize it. It was more or less you kind of get me up to speed on some of these guys that I didn't know as much about, and I'm grateful for what you do. But Cam Whitmore was my guy at first. We were like, well, if we fall to 5, Cam Whitmore. And that was kind of the consensus. As we got into the basketball of it, Steve, instantly the guys that rose to the top were pretty much that three that triumvirate that we talked about. Remember, I was even a little bit more on the Amin Thompson side rather than AUSAR. As we kind of got into the Pistons needs, as we kind of got into, how much it meant when we saw Jeremy Grant kind of leave. AUSAR Thompson was somebody I was just like, man, oh man, oh man. And my only drawback was, do they see him as a guy that can contribute a little bit sooner rather than later? And when he does start to contribute, do they see him as a guy with star potential or just a role player? Troy Weaver made his home run, analogy. I swing big hits. He made that analogy with it already out there that the Pistons had promised, or that someone had promised AUSAR Thompson that he was going to be taken in the top 5. So, look, Troy Weaver's eye, we look at what Killian Hayes could have been, and we see that, okay, that's not going to pan out. Everything since, to me personally, especially with Jaden Ivey, who a lot of people, with the questions that were there, we didn't know what it was going to be. With AUSAR Thompson, Steve, are you more confident that this is a pick that will shade more towards how Jaden Ivey is working out, or more towards how the Killian Hayes pick worked out?
Somewhere in between. What I've been telling people, because there were a lot of people that talked about the competition level at OT, and while I sympathize with them because it's hard tape to evaluate. Defense really doesn't exist. Half court offense at times doesn't exist. It's very much a push the pace kind of league. A couple names to think about. I know some of these might be alarming, but chill out. Deshaun Stevenson, J.R. Smith, Kobe Bryant, and Tracy McGrady. All these dudes came out of high school. When I profiled Shaedon Sharpe last year, I did a deep dive into okay, let's look at the history of guys that came straight out of high school in the NBA, see how many success stories there were. There actually are way more success stories than you thought. It just took a while. All these guys that I mentioned here, very, very bad in their first year or two. T-Mac, 7 points per game, shooting splits of 46.2, 34.1% from 3, and he's probably on the higher side of things here. The Mamba, 7.6 points per game, 43% from 2, 37.5% from 3, 89.1% from the free throw line. And then JR probably had the best, rookie season out of the bunch, which is weird, 10.3 points per game. But this is where I'm going to caution people. JR's shooting numbers in his rookie year, 45.8% from 2, 28.8% from 3. Not good. He's a rookie, inefficient, coming out of high school. That's what you got to expect. And then Deshaun Stevenson, sadly, the guy that got compared to Michael Jordan and ruined the beginning of his career.
My goodness,
anyway,
brother.
2.2 points per game, and then 38% from 2-point range, 8.3% from 3-point range. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Oh, by the way, all these guys played 10 years. 4 out of the 5 guys, or only one of these guys isn't a really, really good player, right? It just takes a while. But what these guys all have in common, too, is a natural feel for the game like AUSAR has, and that athleticism that you can't really teach everywhere. And you guys, the work ethic thing, honestly, I hate to talk about, because in my mind, everybody's got a good work ethic, and the ones that don't, those are the ones that you should highlight, because if you don't have a good work ethic, that's going to stick out more than anything else. And everybody else works in different ways. And this is just a little side note, but I remember a couple of off seasons ago, somebody tweeted out a picture of Luka, just chilling around, smoking a hookah, and they posted alongside of this video of
Hookah Doncic
getting it in the gym, and they're like, "Who's going to be the MVP?" And it's like, come on, man, really. And all those guys I just laid out too. It's why I gave that thing. Deshaun Stevenson, JR, hit with the quote unquote lazy label.
Yeah,
even Deshaun played in the league 13 years. They all work differently. It's going to take time, but these are ones I want everybody to think about.
Yeah. I only bring up the work ethic on the guys that I think are just like gym rats. You know what I mean? I think of when I think of it's obviously a lot of guys who come into the league, they work hard. You have to get to be a professional athlete, right? But I do think there are those certain guys where they just are sickos to a different level, where where some guys, they have a respite that isn't basketball. Some guys, their respite just is basketball. Like Monty Williams said, Jaden Ivey may as well get his mail sent to the Pistons practice facility. The Thompson twins, very similar elk. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Hard workers, and guys who want to be great. guys who want to be great. These guys, everything that we've heard from, even personal connections and sources and things. These guys work hard. They come from good families. They're very very well educated and they take their education seriously. Like a lot of people had concerns, like, well, are they skipping out on high school? Or are they just trying not to go to school? No, these are guys cut from a good cloth, a good family, good head on their shoulders, and they fit all of the intrinsic aspects. When you're talking about Asar Thompson, he fits all the intrinsic aspects that Troy Weaver said he wanted in a basketball player beyond just the skill. So look, they got themselves somebody who can learn, who can grow. And I believe in year one, like we said with Jalen Duren, can he pass the big man triage? Can he rebound effectively? Can he defend? Can he play in the pick and roll both ways, offense and defense? With Asar Thompson, is there something that you guys want to see him be able to do in year one? Even if he's not the fully actualized player that he could be, is there something that you want to see him be able to contribute right away in year one?
I just want to see strong defensive play. Honestly, I think just you want to see that effort on both sides of the ball. Some remnants of a jump shot, but I would say number one thing is just how positive of an impact can he have defensively on this side of the ball.
There you go, man. This defense was bad. We're not going to hide it.
Yeah.
We will criticize this squad, and we don't know necessarily why the defense was as bad as it was because they had some major injuries, but it was bad. And we know they took a step back when they lost Jeremy Grant. And even when he was here, they were still bottom 24 in the league. So you're right. The defensive impact is something that when we talk about all of his athleticism and his speed and how they can play downhill offensively, Lindsey Hunter said something very, very interesting. Monty Williams is going to also affect this defense. He has a plan for this defense. So when the Pistons are picking a guy like Asar Thompson, it's got to be somebody that they believe can fit both ways because they can't run somebody out there and then literally go to the press conference table like they did with Bojan and say, yeah, he can't guard the 4.
Yep.
You can't do that. You can't do that again this year. You're a starter.
Yeah.
Making $20 million a year. Yeah, he can't guard his position, so we got to figure something out. They started shuffling things around. With Asar Thompson, I believe that he was picked kind of in the mode of trying to break all of those other, drawbacks.
Yeah. We should probably start wrapping up because it's 900 degrees in here, dude. Like
I was going to say, it's
about so hot in here. Oh my gosh. Guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Steve, thank you so much for joining. Thank you everyone for joining us from home. This was a really fun night. Be sure you follow and subscribe to Woodward Pistons, but also thank you to Woodward Sports and Lady Jane's and all the sponsors that made it possible for us to be in the studio tonight. Be sure you subscribe to Woodward Sports as well. Head to the website and check out Kool-Aid's work. Follow Kool-Aid at Detroit Kool-Aid. You can follow myself at Sean Half Court. Go check out our guy Jalen at Jalen HTV. Hey, and also be sure you follow our guy Steve at Resball Pod. Go check out his Substack. I'm sure he's gonna have a lot of words post draft on a lot of different things, as well as probably a big board soon on next year's draft. So be sure you're on the lookout for that.
You gotta let Jalen celebrate. I know that was his guy.
Yeah, Jalen. Real quick, Asar Thompson, come here. Yeah.
Hey, Steve, man. We talked. We talked.
Hey, you made it happen, man. You made it happen.
Squat. Yeah, pop a squat.
We got you in the chair now.
Yeah, pop a squat.
All right.
For what?
For what it's worth, we got Asar Thompson. I know Steve. We talked about it. I was on Twitter. I was the lead catalyst of this Asar Thompson train the last few days or so.
He made it happen, folks. He made it happen.
I'm just happy.
He manifested it.
I'm happy it's going on. I'm loving it.
Man, the Woodward Piston boys, I think they know something.
I'm telling you, man. I made that post. I've been posting them all week. Like Steve mentioning, the DM show, like it was very, 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 very good to see. I think it's gonna be good. I know you wanted Jarris Walker, things like that, but I think Asar, I think him on that break, like him, Ivy, and K is gonna be special. I'm looking forward to it.
It's gonna be dope. All right, you guys, this was nice. Thank you for tuning in and honestly staying hip all day to the coverage. We're not going to stop. We have a lot more draft coverage that we're going to bring you guys' way. And obviously, we got the whole rest of the offseason free agency. And I do believe that Troy is going to I think he's going to make a splash in free agency. Man,
speaking of
that
splash,
Jeremy Grant thing,
please
man.
let the stream so I can splash water. It's so hot in here. It's a hot box Kool-Aid.
Brother,
We're getting it wrapped up. We're getting it wrapped up. Listen,
Jeremy Grant.
I'm dying.
Jeremy Grant. That is, I think. Hey, listen. Let me know what you guys think about him. I know a lot of people are a little off on him. You guys think that I'm holding sound too long? Is this
I am dying over here, Kool-Aid.
Look, man. Till next time, you guys, like, subscribe. We will check in with you guys later. Do-do-do.